Right, so today we're going to be talking about why you need to not believe everything that you read about limerence online. I say that kind of ironically, of course, as someone who creates a lot of content about limerence, but I hope that I have the humility to say that I don't know the realities of what limerence is defined as, any objective truths about it, because it has not been defined yet. So anything I say on my channel is tentative and there to hopefully help, but it's not a substitute for seeking therapy and focusing on yourself in a way that's meaningful, because the internet is always going to have every variation of every idea, and someone's going to find it very relevant and important and then go and say it and put it on their platform. And I've seen plenty of people, both seemingly qualified and not seemingly qualified at all, and they might be very honest about that, to talk about mental health issues and just saying very broad statements about limerence, which are just, I think, even on the basis of it all being tentative, really far-fetched. Just very dismissive, I'd say sometimes. Both dismissive and overstretched in the sense of like really trying to make a statement work when there's just too much nuance to ever say that. Hi, my name is Marius. I'm a counselling psychology doctoral student in London. And on this channel, we talk about psychology, mental health, and anything I think you might find interesting or useful. Remember, anything you see on social media is not a replacement for therapy. So this is going to be a bit freeform, but it's interesting, that word nuance. So I've been really hesitating about creating content on YouTube about mental health and psychology, because there is this opinion in the community that, oh, if you create content online, like it's always going to be really simplified and too basic and you're not actually helping anyone. People are just psychology window shopping. I've seen that written and I thought that was interesting. Like, the thing is, I think that there is a point to that, but I also don't think it's worth gatekeeping everything about psychology. Like, it is worth putting stuff out there that's helpful with the right warnings, like being able to say, hey, this is not a replacement for therapy. This is hopefully entertaining and useful even, but that does not mean that you are suddenly equipped to self-diagnose with anything or become your own therapist or anything like that. It's just there for interest, and I hope it's able to generate discussions that are interesting and useful. Now, the fear of that, it really is that people will distort those ideas, and they'll say people who are not qualified, not willing to put in the research, will start to say things that are untrue, and if they have a bigger following, then more people are likely to believe them, or at least there's broader reach, and that's dangerous. And that's really where I see the problem, is that people are probably more willing to just put something out there quickly, use ChatGPT to make their, outline for their video or the script and just say that, top 20 tips on how to do this, and then they think that they've made something useful. And I just don't think that's appropriate anyway. Now, use of AI is a different thing. Of course, it's useful, but you do have to use it properly and be able to vet that information appropriately and not just use whatever it spits out at you, especially about topics that are still, under researched, such as limerence. And so of course that's what brings me to making this video at all. So the one thing I hope to achieve by putting this video out is that you are okay with accepting that the content about limerence is all pending. It's not established facts, not limerence is for sure the X and Y. Of course, what Dr. Dorothy Tenoff established in her book, Love and Limerence, is the foundation of what we understand to be limerence. So yes, if we're going to agree on something that we all can accept as part of what limerence is, that is it. But beyond that, even some other books that have been published since then, I'll be honest, I don't think we should use as reputable references, to be honest, because one of them that's very famous was written by someone who goes by pseudonym, and so they claim to be a neuroscientist. I would say if you're not willing to put your real name on it, then I don't know if we're really going to believe that you are a neuroscientist or know anything about this, because we can't check your credentials. We don't know really where you got your facts from. I don't know how reputable it is anyway. I haven't looked into those references, to be honest, but the fact that you need to use a pseudonym as a scientist, I don't know, it rings alarm bells for me. I'm willing to put my face on it. So, the mistakes I made, you can say it was me, you can find me, you can blame me, right? If I say something that's untrue, patently untrue, or like I'm lying, then you can find me. You can tell me that it was me, and you can check my credentials and all that stuff. Like, this is my job. I'm training to be a counselling psychologist and doing my doctorate degree. So that doesn't make me more capable of talking about this. It does. I mean, obviously it does, because I'm in the field and I'm training to be a therapist and a counselling psychologist. So in that sense, I understand the domain, I understand the methodologies, I know generally how to work with mental health, and there are a lot of skills that are relevant there in approaching limerence and studying limerence. I just mean that just because I'm in the industry doesn't mean that I am especially equipped, or things that I say should be taken at face value because I'm going to be a counselling psychologist once I finish my doctorate. So it's the same reason, just because you have doctorate in front of your name doesn't mean that what you say is true. The reason I feel like saying this, and this is probably the only video I've ever made that's been so unscripted, it's just like, I know that this needs to be said about the community of limerence, in that it's composed of people that are going through something incredibly intense, unfortunate, damaging, draining, distracting, really harmful. Okay, limerence is really tough to go through. And the thing is about that is that then that is a vulnerable community by definition. And so to spread information willy-nilly in a way that's not well researched and not given the appropriate labels of being information that you need to take with a pinch of salt because we haven't studied limerence enough. There's like a handful of papers that have been written about limerence, and that's it. That is not enough to be making big statements about it, about what works to treat it, etc. Now, I accept the irony of someone like me making this, because I have given specific tips or guidance on maybe this could work for you, but it's there for information purposes, right? It's not advice. It's not advice in the sense of this tends to work, there is scientific research behind it, you should do it. I give tips that I guess I know that I've seen benefit clients, both that have limerence and don't, because there are other conditions that are similar to limerence, you know, like relationship OCD, OCD generally, love addiction maybe, but I don't really think so. There are things, maladaptive daydreaming, not being in the present moment, you know, escaping anxiety, that kind of stuff. All that overlaps. So some things that work for those could work for limerence, but I don't know what helps limerence. I don't. But even though I work with clients with limerence, the majority of the time, the majority of the clients I have are people who identify as having limerence. Yeah. So like, but each time I meet them, we discuss, what do you think it is about your situation that made you think it's limerence? And the answers are not that consistent. So I'm always learning a specific person's experience of this event and saying, right, it could be, I think maybe it is limerence, but never having a fixed idea, like this is it. So that's why I'm saying, for people who are online looking at materials like this, I've seen it on YouTube, I've seen it on blogs, I've seen it on Reddit, I've seen it on everywhere. Some things that are said, they're just clearly untrue. They're either clearly untrue or so reduced to this one sentence or this one statement that I'm like, how is that even going to help anyone? One, it's like too vague, it's never going to be useful. Or two, it's so confident without any evidence that I think you're just being neglectful of your responsibilities to do your research and know that, hey, I can't make very bold statements about what limerence is or isn't and what works for it. As an example, I've seen someone say that limerence is the same as, it's identical as, and naming another mental health disorder. Now, I'm not going to mention what it was, but there is nothing that I've seen that is exactly the same as limerence. Nothing. Otherwise, Dorothy Tanov would not have created a separate word for it. I think her PhD was in clinical psychology, so she would have known this condition existed at the time, was defined at the time. So you might say, oh, she wanted to make something unique of her own. Scientists do that sometimes, is just to like have their name associated with something, so they make up a new disorder. The fact that in the future now, like, what is it, 50 years later, we are still in need of the word limerence and not the other word, because the other things that already existed that are similar to limerence would have eaten up the demand for the use of the word limerence. But we have these online communities. What Reddit has, something like, the big one has 41,000 people in it. I don't even know how to measure how many people in the world know that they have limerence or are experiencing limerence, but they haven't found, you know, those other terms to be appropriate. Doctors don't know how to deal with this. Their therapists don't know how to deal with this because they don't know what the term is and how it's different to anything else that's already out there. The term limerence, in my opinion, needs to be established. If we find that it is no different to something else that already exists, then let's not establish the new term, because why would we need a new term if it already exists? I don't believe a word already exists. And so when I hear people saying, oh, it's the same as this, it's just the same as that, or using it into limerence interchangeably with other words and other conditions, it bothers me, especially when it comes from people who are supposed to be qualified, not like to know the difference or to be able to do the research to know that they shouldn't be making statements like that. Mainly because I think it puts people at risk. It puts people at risk of flying under the radar, of mislabeling what they're going through and thinking that something that will work for that will work for them, and it doesn't. And it's just, you know, the list goes on and on. Okay, so all I'm saying is, to keep it a bit simpler, is be cautious for what you read about limerence. Take what is useful to you, but get the appropriate support. Go to therapy if you can, and don't give up after the first try or even after the 5th try with a therapist. It does depend on the type of person you get matched up with. So choose carefully, keep trying. Getting a proper supportive therapeutic relationship can make an incredible difference. I really believe that. But it's not as easy as just pluck one therapist out and try it. And if it doesn't work, then therapy is not for me, or it won't work for me. Also, keep in mind, not many therapists know what limerence is. So you can start to raise that awareness and say, hey, I really think I experienced limerence. This is what it's defined as for me, but there is content out there if you want to go and research on it. And the therapist, I'm sure, will be very willing to start to educate themselves a bit, insofar as there is stuff out there, as we've discussed here. And hopefully one day it will just be one of those things that we can say limerence and everyone will know what it is, because I think that will help people out, I hope. Cool. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourself.